and orcs in the deep places of the world.
Everything out of the ordinary is to be reported.
Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled around their shores.
It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human.
We are all now programmed for perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
It's a hard world for little things.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
You know, there was a time in this country when smart people were considered cool. Well, maybe not cool, but smart people did things like build ships and pyramids, and they even went to the moon.
The Great Conjunction is the end of the world! Oh, the beginning?
It was a church. Do you know that word? Yes, there were still churches when I was a child.
But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light.
You now belong to God, no longer to the devil.
What you said just now is quite extraordinary.
You're listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalie.
Hey everybody, I'm back. I'm such a dork. Welcome to the very first episode of 2015 of Beyond Extraordinary. As always, coming to you from the Nat Cave, it is Natalina, and I am so excited to be back in the saddle. It's been a long time, you guys. You know, I've had so many of you saying to me, there has not been a new episode of Beyond Extraordinary since around Christmas time. What is going on? And I simply say to that, well, needed a little break. I'm going to get into a lot more detail about that later in the show, but I had some family stuff going on. I had some issues with just, not feeling well, and all of it culminated in me just needing a healthy break. And during that break, I did a lot of thinking. I had a lot of time to recalibrate and reinvigorate and, get into the, so I kind of found myself getting into a little bit of a different mode. So keep listening. In a little bit, we're going to talk more about that and what you can expect from Beyond Extraordinary going forward in the future. I'm super excited about it, and I hope that you will be as well. But hey, this episode was supposed to be the traditional annual retrospective, right, that I do around New Year's. Well, obviously, here we are in February, so this isn't exactly a New Year's episode, right? But it is still going to be a retrospective. Now, we are not going to go and look at all of the headlines and news and events that took place in 2014 around the world. What we're actually going to do is we're going to talk about 2014 on extraordinaryintelligence.com. We're going to talk about the things that happened on the site. We're going to talk about things that happened with this group. We're going to talk about the things that happened with this ministry. We're going to talk about the things that happened with this radio show. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun for everybody to just kind of get in the time machine, go backwards a year, and kind of just evaluate what we have gone through, and it's been quite a journey. I owe all of it, of course, to my two favorite groups of people in the world, and that is my fellow Christians out there who have been tuning in and listening, and I also owe a huge debt of gratitude to all of the wonderful, amazing, fantastic guests who have been so gracious as to come on to this show and share their wisdom, their knowledge, their faith. It has been fantastic, and it's only going to get better, folks, going forward. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look backward, and we're going to reminisce a little bit. And then towards the end, we're going to talk about going ahead into the future. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, you know what, you guys? If this, it's possible that this is the very first episode of Beyond Extraordinary you've ever listened to. And if that's the case, welcome. And if I haven't scared you away yet, thank you for sticking around. What I am going to invite you to do is go to the main website, the hub on the internet for all things Beyond Extraordinary and all things Extraordinary Intelligence. And that is located conveniently at extraordinaryintelligence.com. All one word, .com. And there you will find archives to all of our past episodes. You'll also find links to all of the places where we wander about the internet. You'll find all of the archives of the articles that I've written throughout the years, and you'll find in the right-hand sidebar all kinds of good stuff. You will see buttons that will take you to all of the different places where Extraordinary Intelligence and Natalina are located on social media. You'll find a link to Google+. You'll find a link to the Facebook group. You'll find a link to Twitter. You will find links to that and so much more. Also, you will see that you can subscribe to the site so that you don't miss a single doggone thing that comes out of extraordinaryintelligence.com. Most of the social media stuff, I'll say, especially and Pinterest as well, there's a link there. Most of it, like Twitter, for example, I forget about it a lot, and then all of a sudden I'll remember it and I'll say, oh my goodness, Twitter, and then I will tweet, manically tweet for a period of time where suddenly probably everyone who follows me on Twitter is like, wow, what's going on? And then I will drop off the face of the planet, the Twitter planet for a while, and repeat scenario. So, but if that sounds appealing to you, you should probably follow me on Twitter, right? And Google+, same thing. Most of the time, what you will find is that it's a great way to keep on top of whatever the latest episodes are coming out of Beyond Extraordinary, because I will always tweet links to those out as soon as they come out. The instant they are published, they go out on Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, Facebook, all of that. As far as Facebook, I don't have a traditional Facebook fan page, and I'm still deliberating whether or not I want to do that. I would welcome your suggestions and feedback on that. What I do have is a Facebook group, the Extraordinary Intelligence Discussion Group. And that I started just as a place to, initially I started it just as a place to put links to my articles and stuff, and just to hear what it, if anyone wanted to discuss them. And what it's evolved into is just a really great place for fellowship and discussion and some friendly debating and iron sharpening iron. It is really a lot of fun. And so if you want to be part of it, there's not a very strict vetting process. Just click the little Facebook link on extraordinaryintelligence.com in the right hand side, and then it'll take you to the group, and then you can, it's a closed group, so you have to be part of it to see what's happening inside. But you click join group, and then when myself, or more likely one of my wonderful fabulous moderators, sees that somebody wants in the group, we will take a quick peek at your profile. And the main thing we're looking for is that you've been on Facebook for some substantial amount of time. This way we can avoid people who are spammers or trolls, who just creates Facebook accounts to cause havoc. We want to be fairly confident that you are in fact a real person. And then the other thing that we look for is to make sure that your Facebook page isn't covered in really outrageously anti-Christian rhetoric, because probably just not a great fit for the group if that's what you're into. But if you meet that small little set of criteria, you will be welcomed into the group with open arms, and you'll meet all of the over 1,000 wonderful people who are super engaged in regular dialogue about all manner of things that we find interesting and weird and wacky and fun, and matters of faith, matters of conspiracy, supernatural, spirituality, all of that stuff gets discussed right there in the Facebook Extraordinary Intelligence Discussion Group. Join up if you feel so inclined. And as I said, all of those links will be located in the right-hand sidebar of the site. You'll also notice that if you feel like you like what you hear and you like what you read and you kind of like what Natalina's doing here on Extraordinary Intelligence and Beyond Extraordinary, and you feel moved to donate give a gift of any kind, there is options on the site for you to do that. There's a link in the sidebar, I think. I don't think I took that away, but there is a link in the navigation bar that says support, and that'll tell you a little bit about the mission of the site, and then it'll show you how you can either subscribe to a monthly donation or you can give a one-time gift if you feel moved to do so. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Right now, all donations are going into the Natalina Needs a New Car Fund. So that is very much appreciated. Oh, and this I just wanted to tell you. So, I also make my own, I make handmade jewelry, right, at Extraordinary Boutique, extraordinaryboutique.com. If you want to support me in that way by buying some of my handmade jewelry, you can do that. But what I wanted to say was, I have these wonderful little bumblebee pendants. And as you know, the bumblebee is the official mascot of extraordinaryintelligence.com. And I'm going to make some really great necklaces and bracelets with the bumblebee pendants. So what I wanted to do, just as something really special, is that for the, those of you who donate $50 or more to the site, I am going to send you a bumblebee necklace handmade by myself that you can have, and they're really cute. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, it's just really cute, like little gold pendant with little rhinestones on it, and then I'll put some fun beads and stones together to make it all cute and pretty. And the reason I say $50 because I mean, my gosh, I don't expect anybody out there to donate anything. But as far as the necklaces, I just want to make sure that I at least cover the materials that it takes to make the necklace. So I'm going to make 5 of those. So I'm going to say for the next 5 people who donate at least $50, you are going to get a bumblebee necklace. So make sure that if you do that, follow it up with an email to me with your address so I can send you a wonderful little gift. Aww. And that is that. What we're going to do now, you guys, is we are going to jump right into that little retrospective I was telling you about. This episode is officially being called the Retrospective and Reboot. Beyond Extraordinary is back, and we're going to be going strong from this point forward. I've already got a few interviews in the bag, you guys. I've got a few interviews chilling in my downloads box that I just really need to put out there, but I needed to get this episode out first. So without any further ado, let's look back on the year 2014 in Extraordinary Intelligence. Now, one of the big things that created a huge stir amid the fans, the multitudes of people who listen to Beyond Extraordinary, is that I changed the intro music. I know, right? It caused so much commotion because I guess a lot of people liked the original one that I made. And what happened was the original one that I made when the show first started had a lot of politics clips involved, had a lot of conspiracy clips involved, and I found that as the show went on, I was gravitating more to issues of the supernatural importance and spiritual importance, and I wanted an intro that had clips and just sort of a vibe that went along with that. So I made a new one. And I created some new music. Well, I did not create the music. This wonderful, wonderful gentleman named Jason composed the music, and I'll put a link in the show notes. It's all original music, and what I did was I took 3 different tracks that he did, and I sort of mixed them together to create sort of my own Franken track, and then I added in clips from various movies and TV shows and whatnot, and created this new thing. But what I did was last year, or maybe it was the year before, on one of my episodes, I did a breakdown of all of where all the different clips came from. Well, you guys, get ready because I'm doing it again with the new introduction. You guys seemed to really, really enjoy it when I did that with the last one. So I am going to do it again right now for you with this new introduction. So when you're listening and you hear all of those intriguing clips, you'll know exactly where they came from, and you'll get a little glimpse inside the inner workings of my messy mind. So without any further ado, here we go.
on your guard. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world.
That, of course, was Gandalf warning the Fellowship about the dangers in the mountain. Of course, from Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I really like that clip because I think it just speaks to the dangers that we face, the unseen and the unknown realm. And so I chose that one to kick things off.
Everything out of the ordinary is to be reported.
Now, that clip is actually a carryover from the original theme music, but that is from the film adaptation of the book Watership Down, which, as I've mentioned a number of times on this show, is one of my favorite books, written by Richard Adams. And in that clip, you hear the character General Woundwort, who is the lead rabbit of a warren that the rabbits happen upon in their journey, and his warren is run very like a police state, and he is sort of the antagonist of the book and of the movie. He wants to run his warren in a very oppressive manner, and you know, the whole concept of everything out of the ordinary is to be reported. It speaks to sort of the climate post 9/11 in our country, really, where you're sort of encouraged to turn in your fellow citizens if you see anything suspicious, the whole see something, say something thing. And so I felt that clip was I decided to keep it because I think it's very pertinent to the world in which we're currently living.
Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled around their shores.
So that's a clip from one of my all-time favorite films, Blade Runner, and you'll see that make another appearance in this introduction. That was the voice of Roy Batty, and he is, of course, one of the main characters in Blade Runner. He is the leader of the renegade replicants, and he's the primary antagonist of the film. And I thought that was just a very chilling quote that, well, you can read all sorts of things into it. So that's why I included that one.
It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human.
That clip is from the film A Scanner Darkly, which was based on the Philip K. Dick novel. I've made it pretty obvious that I'm a big Philip K. Dick fan. Of course, I've had his widow, Tessa Dick, on the program to talk about her late husband and his writing. And of course, Blade Runner is also based on a Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So he wrote really strange fiction, sort of sci-fi, cyberpunk, I guess you could say in some cases. And most of what he wrote was very challenging and very, very profound. And Scanner Darkly is one of the more deep and thought-provoking things that he wrote. And the film adaptation, surprisingly, wasn't bad. So that's where that clip is from.
We are all now programmed for perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness.
That very chilling clip is from the 1971 George Lucas film THX 1138. It's a really creepy film. It's a futurist film, dystopian future. It's a very loveless, drugged out society, kind of reminiscent of Brave New World, and in which everyone is drugged out of their minds to keep them controlled. And of course, through these drugs and through this fascist society in which they live, they are all programmed for perfect happiness. Very chilling, very poignant.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
And that's the second clip from Blade Runner. Again, Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer. Just a self-explanatory, creepy clip, and I thought it actually was really poignant following the Program for Perfect Happiness clip, so I popped it in there.
It's a hard world for little things.
That little clip is from the incredible 1955 movie Night of the Hunter. Again, one of my absolute favorite movies. If you haven't seen Night of the Hunter, you have to. It's very dark, and it's not like a lot of films that came out of that time period. It's very expressionistic. It's very dialogue-driven. Amazing cinematography. It's a dark tale, but it's really, really a powerful movie. So that little clip there, "It's a Hard World for Little Things," is reflective of the fact that the main plot of the film is this reverend, this preacher, who's also a serial killer, is on the hunt of these two little children. And of course, it's a very false virtue that he has, and these children end up in the care of this very kindly elderly woman who looks after orphans, and her virtue is very true and very real. And she's a Christian as well, and it culminates in this amazing scene where there's an overnight standoff, and the reverend is standing outside and the woman is inside protecting the children, and they're both singing gospel music, but from her it's very genuine, and from him it's very sinister. It's a very, very good movie. I would highly recommend looking into Night of the Hunter.
What we doing live? Echoes in eternity.
That clip is from the Ridley Scott film Gladiator, and it's during one of his epic speeches, and it's pretty self-explanatory.
There was a time in this country when smart people were considered cool. Well, maybe not cool, but smart people did things like build ships and pyramids, and they even went to the moon.
I've had a lot of feedback from people who really enjoy that clip, and it's obviously from the film Idiocracy, and very underrated film. It's a comedy, but it's kind of disturbing, and it's a little bit revealing in just sort of the dumbing down of society. It imagines what a future society might be like if basically we all devolved into a bunch of idiots. And so a time traveler from our time goes into this future run by idiots, and he tries to convince them that it's not a bad thing to be intelligent.
The Great Conjunction is the end of the world! Oh, the beginning?
I'm a big fan of fantasy movies, especially the ones that were made like in the 80s. They were really great. And that clip is from the Jim Henson film, The Dark Crystal.
It was a church. Do you know that word? Yes, there were still churches when I was a child.
That clip is another carryover from the original Beyond Extraordinary intro, and it is from the 1956 film version of George Orwell's 1984.
But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light.
Of course, that is Ephesians 5:13.
You now belong to God, no longer to the devil.
There's a lot of controversy in Christian circles about whether or not the story of Les Miserables is one that is virtuous, one that it, sends the right message. And I happen to just believe it's a really great story of redemption. I love Les Mis, and this little clip is from the 1935 film adaptation of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, and it pretty much speaks for itself.
What you said just now is quite extraordinary.
That is just a clip from an old Monty Python movie, and it just really speaks to what we're all about here. It's quite extraordinary.
You're listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalie.
Enjoyed that one, and we're gonna merge directly into the next thing I want to talk about that happened in 2014 on the site. And you may or may not have noticed this, but we did officially install a mascot for Extraordinary Intelligence, and that was the little buzzing bee. So I will tell you a little bit of the background on how this came about. So way back when I started the site years ago, obviously, the subject matter was a little bit different, the setup was a little bit different, and specifically my worldview that I approached everything from was dramatically different than it is now. And so I had just a different sensibility at the time. And at the time, the mascot for Extraordinary Intelligence was this little green alien. And he looked, just like your standard description of a gray, where it's had the large head and the big black eyes. And he was just all over my site. And so a little bit later, I had a different artwork. It was like a woman who was holding some sort of a crystal ball or something, conjuring something, very dark and occultic, and the site itself was black with green font and green text and titles and that kind of thing. It was just all very dark. So fast forward a number of years, and I became a devout Christian and changed the direction I was taking on the site to the biblical worldview. And so I had to make some changes even just in the actual look of the site, just so that it jived a little bit more with where I was now coming from. So the first thing I did is I took all of that imagery down. And then the next thing I did was I lightened the site up. I brightened it up. I gave it a lighter background and something a little bit more cheerful. And for a long time, I just had my Extraordinary Intelligence banner, but I didn't have any logo. I didn't have any artwork. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't want to do something super gratuitous and just, put a big picture of Jesus on it or something, just because I was a Christian. I didn't want to do that. That didn't seem authentic. So, like I said, for a long time, there was just no really official logo or mascot or artwork that felt right for Extraordinary Intelligence. And I thought about it, and when you're marketing your site, it's useful to have something recognizable that is attached to your site always. And so I realized I needed a logo, I needed a mascot, I needed some kind of artwork, some sort of identifier for Extraordinary Intelligence. And I decided that I wanted to use a bee as my mascot because I've always loved bees. Now, let me just put it this way, though. If I encounter bees like in real life, like in the actual real world, I'm terrified of them. I don't want them anywhere near me. I'm an outdoors person, so I've been stung many times. I'm obviously not allergic, or I would be dead by now. But I get scared of them. But just what a bee is and what it stands for, I think they're beautiful creatures. I think they're remarkable creatures. I think they're wonderful and necessary and magnificent creatures. And so it just seemed perfect. Now, why, but why a bee? How does it connect? Is there any kind of connection beyond the fact that I just like them? If I was just choosing something I liked, I could have chosen like a cat or something, but it's interesting because biblically, bees and hornets, they're alternatively described as attackers and defenders, and they also are providers of sustenance. Scripture contains so many instances where honey and honeycombs are described. Some of my favorites are Proverbs 24:31, where it says, "My son, eat honey, for it is good, and the drippings of the honeycomb are sweet to your taste." There's countless. I could come up with a whole list. One of my favorites. This one honestly is pretty much my motto for life. From Proverbs 16:24, where it says, "Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones." When I think about what it means to be a Christian, I think of what a picture, what an image the life of a bee presents. Bees live and thrive in an environment of fellowship, right? When you imagine a hive, they rely on one another to keep the hive alive. Bees go from place to place gathering nectar, and they leave behind their sweetness wherever they go. When they're threatened, they'll defend the hive and they'll defend one another, but they're not known to provoke confrontation. So, and bees, they travel far and wide to every corner of the world, spreading their sweetness. And as a Christian spreads the gospel far and wide, so the bee also shares sweetness with the world. So I thought there were some parallels. And then also think about this. Bees are crucial to our food supply. If the bees were gone, there would be, our entire food supply would just collapse. We would be undernourished and we would ultimately perish. So similarly, Jesus Christ is crucial to our lives, and without him and without his word, our hearts and minds and spirits would never fully be nourished. Only through our belief in him may we not perish but have eternal life. So for all of these reasons, I just thought the humble buzzing bee would be the perfect mascot for Extraordinary Intelligence. So I made that selection. I set it in stone and I went for it. And what I started with was I had some little clip art, just like some little clip art of bees, and I just kind of slapped them in various places on the site. But it just wasn't cohesive. It didn't like speak to what it wasn't really what I wanted. You know, if you know me, you know that my sensibilities as far artistically are very kind of abstract. I like things that are different and a little anarchic sometimes. So I put out a call to my listeners and to my friends. Hey, if there's any graphic designers out there or any artists out there who want to take a stab at designing a new logo for Extraordinary Intelligence featuring a bee and or a honeycomb or something along those lines, you know, I would love to see what you've got. And a lot of people responded. And I will say there are a lot of talented people out there in the audience. Really, really, there's a lot of talented people out there. But you know what it's like when, even though you're seeing all of these wonderful submissions, it just like they're not quite what you're looking for. And so then my amazing friend Gons, who is the co-host of Canary Cry Radio at canarycryradio.com, he decided that he was going to take a stab at it. And you know, he said, well, what is your vision? What do you want? And I described it so poorly. It was so hard for me to put into words. I said something like, oh, well, you know, I want it to have black and pink in it. I don't want like the standard yellow and black bee. I want something a little more, a little different. And then I want some like flourish on it. And I want it to kind of be a little abstract, and I want it to be not like predictable. I want it to be, you know, something unique that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And I think I used the word little anarchic a little bit, just something, you know, I was like, think of my personality. What, you know, whatever. We had this conversation. As I said, I described it so poorly. I could not put into words exactly what I wanted, but fortunately he was able to reach inside my cranium and pull out this vision of what I was trying to say, and he slapped it down and it came out just like exactly what I wanted. Like I could not have asked for anything better. And if you haven't seen it, go to extraordinaryintelligence.com. It's the art right at the top of the page, and it's also the featured artwork for this particular episode. And yeah, that was Gons. So if you're hanging around at Canary Cry Radio on their Facebook or Twitter or whatever, just give him a shout out and tell Gons that he did a really good job with that artwork. And some people have assumed that it was Basil who did it because Basil does all of the artwork for Canary Cry Radio. But in this case, this was done by by Gons. Basil said he would do it, but he was too late. Gons got it done before him, and he did such a good job. He really nailed it. So thank you so much, Gons. And of course, Canary Cry Radio is one of my absolute favorite podcasts. So if you're looking for a podcast to listen to and you have not listened to Canary Cry Radio, you haven't found them, you really should check them out. So that happened in 2014, and it really just kind of, it just kind of excited me to have that done and down. And like now I have, after being in existence for 7-8 years or whatever, I finally have something that I feel like just signifies, it makes Extraordinary Intelligence have like this singular look and feel and vibe and recognizable thing. So thank you, Gons, and thank you to all of you who submitted your artwork, because gosh, you did such a good job, and I will be probably coming back to many of you over time as I come up with other projects that I want to take on. Oh, when you hear that gentle heart music, that can only mean one thing. Yes, that means we are kicking this retrospective into the next level, and we are going back in time, folks. We are going to jump into our extraordinary time machine, and we're going to cruise all the way back to January of 2014, and we're going to take a look at what we have talked about on Extraordinary Intelligence and Beyond Extraordinary since the beginning of 2014 all the way through. We're going to hear from all of our guests that have been on the show. We're going to hear little clips of them. We are going to be reminiscing, and this is going to be a lot of fun because let me tell you, Beyond Extraordinary would be nothing if not for the amazing people who have taken the time to sit down and talk with me and talk to all of you guys out there and share their knowledge and their research and their insights. And so let's just kind of pay tribute to some of those awesome guests as we go back in time, starting with January and all the way through until present day. And remember, whenever you hear this, it means we are traveling back in time and we are hearing from someone from our past. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? Let's cruise all the way back to January 2014 when we kicked off the year with bringing a musical note to Beyond Extraordinary. The podcast was alive with the sound of music when we had none other than Andy Jennings from Dissident Prophet on the show. And what an incredible guest he was. He made such an impact on so many of you with his incredible testimony and his just sincerity. Andy's a good friend. He's such a good guy. The whole band is so talented. And it was a really fun show to do because we were able to take different songs that Dissident Prophet has released and sort of intermingle them into the show as Andy and I were talking. So I tried to pick clips from different Dissident Prophet songs and put them into appropriate places throughout the show, so it was kind of a musical extravaganza. And one of the things that was the most touching about that show was when Andy at the beginning shared his testimony. It was it was such an incredible story, and I'm going to share with you just a little clip so you can kind of get a sense of the vibe of that show, which this clip is including a little bit of Andy's testimony and some of the music that we transitioned into on the show. Dissident Prophet. Check them out, you guys. If you want to listen to some good music with a good Christian message, but you're like me and you're not really into sort of like the mainstream current Christian music, Dissident Prophet is an amazing alternative. They've got such a good sound. They're such a good band. And as I said, their message is incredible. So here we go. Let's listen to a little bit from Andy Jennings.
And she said to me, what do you believe, Andy? And I was like, well, I've read the book of Revelation. She says, well, can I read the Bible to you? And I said, well, not really. I didn't really want to. All right then. Yes, but no. I was saying no in my heart, but saying yes with my mouth to be polite,
Right.
And then she just read from John, the first chapter of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. And whoa, she went through it, and it just hit me between the eyes. God really hit me between the eyes. Then it was like that was just really true. That Jesus really is the way, the truth, and the life. He really is the Lamb. He really is God who became flesh. It just really hit me, and I think that was the time when he really, you can have things in your mind, you can think things intellectually, you can work out all sorts of arguments, you can play about, but that was the point at which it really settled into my spirit. I don't know, I really took it into heart and knew it was true.
Skipping forward in time to early February, our next guest of 2014 was none other than the one and only S. Douglas Woodward. Doug is such a friend of this show and a friend of mine, and he's been on the show a number of times. He'll be on again for sure. Doug was on in February to talk about his book, which actually is one of my favorite books that he's written, and he's written a lot of books, you guys. Lying Wonders of the Red Planet. We had such an interesting conversation in that program. We talked about everything from Cydonia to Atlantis. We talked about cosmic war, ancient aliens, mystery religions, underground bases, Cthulhu, the Necronomicon. Oh my gosh, we covered so many bases. That book is incredible. I'm going to urge all of you to go to extraordinaryintelligence.com, click across the top where you see that it says Beyond Extraordinary Podcast, and you'll be able to pull up the archives. Go into the show notes for each of these shows that I'm discussing, and you'll find links to all of the books, programs, music, what have you that I've been talking about, and you can get your hands on it. And if you missed any of these shows, please download, stream, check them out, because these guys are so great, and Doug is no exception to that. He is one of our favorite people, and in this clip you're going to hear Doug is going to be talking about a little anecdote about some astronaut antics.
Virtually every astronaut that went to the moon has a UFO story. I, in fact, was fortunate enough to have a scientist who works at JPL read an early draft of my book, and he was able to fill in some details for me and explain some things, and also correct some of my scientific inaccuracies. But he had an opportunity to visit with Buzz Aldrin over lunch one day and ask him. Said he finally got up enough nerve to ask Buzz Aldrin about the UFO that he saw when he was on the moon. And Buzz basically just looked at him and got red in the face and did everything he could to basically say, I really can't talk about it.
Wow. As I mentioned earlier in the program, I am a huge fan of Philip K. Dick's writing. He was a troubled man. He was a brilliant man. He was a multifaceted man. And one of the most interesting things about Philip K. Dick is that, as intriguing and fantastical as his stories were, his personal life mirrored some of that in a way. He was very complex. He had so many experiences in his life that we could call supernatural, or the conspiracies abound. But I wanted to get a glimpse of what his life was really like, so I had the opportunity to interview his widow Tessa Dick, who is a wonderful and prolific author in her own right. And she was just a sweet lady. She's my kind of gal, because she's kind of eccentric. She's just fantastic, and she gave a great interview and gave us a little glimpse into the personal life of one of this century's most prolific authors of science fiction and speculative, futuristic, sometimes cyberpunk type writing. So good. In this clip, you're going to hear Tessa talks about when she and Philip were experiencing some of the more troubling encounters, particularly that Philip was having, where he was hearing voices and seeing things. And Tessa speculates that it could have been that they were being gang stalked, or that they were they were targeted individuals by, pick your group. It's an interesting thing to consider, and she talks a little bit about why she suspected that in this clip.
The door was unlocked one day, so we went in and snooped around, and there was all this electronic equipment in the vacant apartment, and I think they really were targeting our apartment with radio waves or microwaves or something along those lines.
That's interesting, because he wrote about and spoke about some of the things that, whether it was shadow people or different manifestations and encounters that he had, and you're suspecting that this may have been a result of him and yourself being targeted, like with some sort of an ELF weapon or something like that.
Yeah, perhaps an early version of what they now call the voice of God.
Right.
And oddly enough, he heard the voice of God.
Sure.
On the bedside radio, of all things.
So history is littered with stories about ghosts and hauntings and the like, but it's particularly interesting and intriguing and troubling when one of those stories comes from a prominent politician and businessman, and that was the case with my guest that I had on the show in March, Bob Cranmer, who wrote the book The Demon of Brownsville Road. In that book, he talks about the terrifying demonic infestation and torment that went on inside his own home. As far as Bob's reputation, he really went out on the limb here because he was so well known in the political realm and in the business world. He really took a risk coming forward and telling this story, and took the chance that he would be ridiculed, and in some cases that has happened. But he is very, very adamant that his story is true and that his family did go through, a decade of torment from this presence, this entity that made their lives hell inside the home that he lived in Pittsburgh. So in this clip, he's going to talk about a little bit about what it was like when the entity, the presence, went from sort of just messing with them, flicking lights on and off and that type of thing, to completely manifesting and making itself known. What a terrifying experience.
Later on, when the whole thing blew up and the paranormal activity became in your face, so to speak, and the thing unmasked itself, then all that added up. And all the strange behavior and the fights and the discord that took place in the house with the kids and my wife and I, all of that added up and made sense. This sinister thing had been surreptitiously doing its work with us over the years, and then it finally exploded on the scene, and then it was no longer hiding its presence in the house.
One of my favorite people in the whole widest of worlds is Dr. Michael Heiser, and in his first appearance on Beyond Extraordinary back in April of 2014, he did not disappoint. One of my favorite things about Dr. Heiser is that he is more than happy to tell wonderful stories and personal anecdotes about his life, and he's just such a warm and charming person, but he also, delivers such incredible scholarship to the Christian world. In this clip, you're going to hear, that particular program, that show that Mike and I did, we talked about a wide variety of topics. But in this particular clip, you're going to hear a little snippet of Mike's testimony about not only how he became a Christian, but how he determined that he wanted to be a scholar, or in his words, a crusty old professor.
Yeah, I became a Christian when I was in high school, and I just immediately had a desire to read the Bible. Like let's find out about all this stuff. I'm seems to be the only one in my immediate circle here that cares about this, and I want to know. So I read through it in high school, and it really fed into my geekiness, to be honest with you, because I do remember in junior high, in 7th grade, sitting in an ancient history class, and the guy was talking about the pharaohs or something, and I remember sitting there thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to be a crusty old professor. That you see in the movies and all this this is what I want to do.
Also in April of 2014, we spoke to the one and only Gonzo Shimura, who at that time had just released his full-length film, Age of Deceit 2, Alchemy and the Rise of the Beast Image. That film is incredible. Gonz went through some really ups and downs with that, with being targeted by someone who was accusing him of all kinds of falsehoods about the film and stuff like that. But ultimately, Gons prevailed. His film is available to be watched, purchased, and enjoyed. And the theories that Gons presents in that film are something that I think everyone should take the time to watch and ponder. Now, this clip you're going to hear is not about the film. This clip you're going to hear is a selection from the beginning of the program when Gons was sharing his testimony. And he's going to be so mad at me. Listen to this clip about how Gons met his wife. And then please go and leave a comment for Gons. #CabanaBoy.
But one day I'm teaching this 4-year-old girl, and of course, you know, the mother looked like a young, attractive, not very Orange County, but just an attractive lady. And she, after the lesson, I give her the whole spiel, like, oh, she did well today, blah, blah, blah. And, that was the last lesson of the day. So I was kind of getting ready to go, because you're in the water for like 8 hours a day, and it's pretty intense. So I was pretty tired. But then she turns around and she goes, hey, can I actually ask you another question? And I was like, oh, sure, no problem. And she goes, are you seeing anybody? And I go, excuse me? I don't know if this is appropriate conversation to be having. But she said, well, I'm just curious, and I'll leave a card with the office or whatever. So if you're interested, just give me a call. And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. It's pretty bold, right? Turns out she was actually, I guess it was kind of a dare from her friend, because she had, been talking to her friends about me, the swim teacher. They called me the Cabana Boy. So I was like, all right, cool, whatever. But I called her because I was curious. I'm like, what was this whole thing about? Well, it turns out she was just, she was just dared by her friends and whatnot. But, we started talking, and she was a pretty interesting lady. And so, we just went out, started hanging out, and she ended up becoming my wife.
So the very first guest to ever appear on Beyond Extraordinary was someone who would become one of my dearest friends, and that is the one and only Chris Putnam. In 2014, Chris released the book, The Supernatural Worldview, and it is a remarkable book that I recommend to absolutely everyone. If somehow you have missed reading The Supernatural Worldview, I urge you to pick it up, read it, and really think about a lot of the stuff that Chris talks about. It's going to challenge you, but it's good stuff, and it's good to ponder these things. Chris appeared on the show again in 2014. Actually, he made a number of appearances in 2014. We'll hear from him again in a little bit. But on this particular show, we specifically were talking about the supernatural worldview. And in the clip that you're about to hear, Chris specifically discusses the problem of evil.
Yeah, that's part of the paranormal paradigm shift. And the way I attach this to prophecy is, that many prophecy scholars have written for ages that we would start to see, an increasing interest in occult things and in the spirit world as the end times approach, because many people are being led astray into a non-Christian worldview that is going to exalt the Antichrist and basically Satan. And unfortunately, I think that's the case. I think that's where this pantheistic monistic worldview is heading, this all is one stuff, because all is not one, and it clearly isn't. And people like to bring up the problem of evil as a problem for Christianity, but it's really more a problem for them, for the non-Christians, than it is for us, because we have an answer for evil, and they don't. If your worldview is that people are basically good, then how do you explain evil? Because we're saying people are basically sinful. So we have an answer for why there's evil in the world. People are sinful, and they're evil spirits that are trying to lead people to hell. And, that's our answer. What's yours? You're telling me that people are basically good, and they're just misunderstood. They just need education. Well, why is there so much evil in the world? They're the ones that need the answer. And the problem of evil is much more a problem for this other worldview than it is for ours.
Back in the beginning of May, I was honored to welcome the one and only Derek Gilbert to Beyond Extraordinary. As good as he is at hosting View from the Bunker and co-hosting PID Radio with his lovely wife Sharon, Derek is also an exemplary guest, and he was so interesting to talk to. We talked about such a wide variety of issues, everything from online surveillance to the New Apostolic Reformation and Dominionism. We talked about so many things on this show. And Derek also was kind enough to share a bit about his testimony and the history of how PID Radio came to be. It was such a really good show. In this clip you're going to hear, Derek specifically talks about digital surveillance and not only what we should be aware of as far as how everything that we do online is being watched, cataloged, chronicled by someone, but Derek takes it to the point of discussing from a Christian perspective why we should be concerned about our online behavior and how it's not just whether or not Big Brother is watching, but who else is watching what we're doing and why that matters.
The point is that Christians be aware that everything that we do is being watched or recorded or stored somewhere.
Right.
And think about that. Now, think about this. I as a Christian should be aware of this all the time anyway, because I believe in a God who's omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. Okay? So I should be believing that I'm watched all the time anyway. And yet I still do things that I would really occasionally anyway would rather not have everybody know about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not proud of that fact. And I'm not proud of the fact that sometimes the threat of somebody knowing what I'm doing on the internet could become public.
Right.
And that changed, frankly, that changed my behavior.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of that fact. And I'm not proud of the fact that the perception of me by other people was having more of an effect on my walk and my beliefs and the way I acted than the fact that, I'm being watched all the time by the creator of the universe who came to earth and died for me.
Later on in May of 2014, I did what was probably one of my more controversial episodes. It was strictly mature adult content, but it was an issue that I felt was really important to talk about, and that was the topic of spectrophilia. It had come about that there were a number of news stories in mainstream news that seemed to point to a rise in stories of people who have had sexual encounters with ghosts or spirits or demons or whatever they labeled them as. This troubled me, and I decided that it was important to discuss this issue in a very open manner. I had two guests on that show sharing their perspectives. I had Chris Putnam on the show, and I also had Patricia Langer, and both of them have a great deal of experience with the supernatural and supernatural phenomena, and they talked about spectrophilia with me and why it's something that we should be concerned about. And throughout the program, I highlighted these different celebrities, people like Kesha, people like Anna Nicole Smith, and many more, that publicly have talked about these encounters and in some ways almost try to paint it as like a cool or desirable experience, which it is anything but. We also talk a little bit about Chris White's work with sleep paralysis. It was a jam-packed show, and as I said, it was very adult content. So if you go back in the archives and look that up, just be warned, the subject matter is very mature. The clip you're about to hear is actually a montage that I created of clips that I found around the net of people talking talking about the specific topic of spectrophilia. And fair warning, it's kind of disturbing.
To everyone around you that you associate with, that you work with, your friends, your family, your doctors, they say it was just a dream, just get over it.
And one of the first things she told us was that she'd been repeatedly sexually assaulted, raped, for lack of a better term, by the presence, the entities in the house.
There's something in here wakes you up during the night and wanting sex with you. Have you heard of incubus haunting?
In Greco-Roman mythology, an incubus and a succubus are the same entity. Yeah. The succubus comes to a man, visits him in his sleep, seduces him, takes sperm, and then places it in a woman.
The incubus has been attacking you while you're sleeping here.
Yeah.
Both physically and sexually.
Yes.
Villagers on the isolated island of Pemba, off the east coast of Africa, claim that they have been plagued by an entity for more than a decade. Some also feel that it has sexually assaulted them. They call this entity the Popabawa.
She finally admitted to us that she was attacked and raped by the ghost. At that time, we thought she was probably crazy.
Somebody was touching me, and the hands were pushing me against my will, and then I could feel the weight of the body on the top of me, and I couldn't see anybody, but then it's like continued. I could feel the pressure, I could feel the energy, the warmth, and then my body was pushed in different directions. And first I was like very confused with all that, but then I just decided to relax, and it was really, really pleasurable, and I really enjoyed it.
It's bringing so much fear within me that I'm unable to sleep, that I feel that I have to keep opening my eyes to see if there's something in the room. And it's affected my mood, it's affected my depression, it's totally rendered me literally useless to society, useless to everybody.
So back in June of 2014, I had a guest who was such a sweet woman. Her name is Deborah Moffat, but her story was not sweet. Her story was called A Deadly Haunting. She just put out a book at that time called A Deadly Haunting, and it was about the true story of an entity that had tormented her family for many, many years. Deborah had kept this secret about what she and her parents and her husband had gone through for 25 years, kept it even from her own children, until she felt that she had to come out with her story. In A Deadly Haunting, she talks about this Mr. Entity, as she came to call him, although he preferred to be known as Prince or even Baal. In this clip you're about to hear, Deborah talks about how this entity specifically seemed to target her mother, which was really interesting because her mother, Lee, was really one of the only people in the family who had a Christian worldview, and that was the person that this entity seemed to torment the most. It was really, really scary.
He focused on my mother-in-law. He even wrote on the mirror that he hated her. I hate Lee. Lee will die. He hated my mother-in-law.
Oh.
I mean, if my mother-in-law didn't have such faith in God and was so religious, I don't know how she would have made it through this ordeal. Because it tormented her day and night. Her clothes, she'd go to put on a piece of clothing, and it had cut the arms out of the clothing. Or if her clothes were hanging in the closet, they were covered in bleach. I mean, it destroyed. She couldn't carry money. She couldn't have a wallet. It would take it and destroy it. And then it would leave the pieces right in front of her on the table so she could see what happened to it.
Toward the end of June, we had a really interesting program. It was actually a debate. And on the show, we had, once again, Chris Putnam, and he was debating Jeffrey Daugherty. Now, Jeffrey Daugherty is an author and a radio show host. He had just recently released a book, and the book was incredibly controversial, and it should make any Christian bristle right at the outset, because the title of the book was Apostle Paul Antichrist. Now, Jeffrey is very, very steeped in New Age Kabbalistic, stereotypical Christ consciousness type of belief. But the disturbing thing is that with this book, Apostle Paul Antichrist, he really was trying to ingratiate himself to a segment of the Christian population who, for whatever reason, whether they were Hebrew roots or really fringy people, were questioning the veracity of the writings of the Apostle Paul. And unfortunately, his book was starting to get some traction. Chris and I had taken it upon ourselves to write a review of his book. We both read his book and we wrote a review about it. And it ended up on Jeffrey's radar, and through a little bit of discussion, we ended up deciding that maybe the best way to handle it was for Jeffrey and Chris to debate. So we hosted the debate on the show, and it was interesting, to say the least. As I said, one of the reasons that Chris and I thought this debate was so important was not because we thought that there was any reason to give the content of Jeffrey's work legitimacy, but because he had actively been courting the Christian realm with his work. It just seemed like something that absolutely needed to be refuted. Now, in this particular clip you're about to hear, it was during a cross-examination portion of the debate, and Chris really holds Jeff's feet to the fire and gets him to admit that essentially he doubts or denies the actual godhood of Jesus Christ. In fact, he goes so far as to be completely unwilling to connect Jesus to being part of the Trinity, and he denies certain portions of the Bible are accurate. It was really, really interesting and really, really disturbing, but I think Chris did a really good job pulling this information out of Jeffrey so that it became very, very clear that he certainly was not operating. Jeffrey was not operating from a Christian worldview in the least, even though his subject matter had Christian overtones. He was not operating from anywhere nearly resembling a Christian worldview. So here's a little clip from that cross-examination portion of the debate.
Jeff, was Jesus God incarnate?
Jesus said he was the Son of God, and I believe that.
Was he God incarnate?
Jesus said he was the Son of God, and I believe that.
Yes or no, was he God incarnate?
Jesus said he was the Son of God, and I believe that.
Question?
I'm answering your question with the words of Jesus.
The second person of the Trinity.
No, I don't believe he was a second person of something called the Trinity.
Okay, thank you. Why did Jesus die?
Because he was a human being, and we all die.
So he was just a human being?
No, I don't. I think when he was on Earth, according to his own words, he was fully a human being. Do you question that?
No. Was he fully God?
He was the Son of God, as he said. I'm not going to add to what he said. He said he was the Son of God, and I'm comfortable with his description.
I'll take that as a no.
Well, you can take it as whatever you want. I'm telling you that he was the Son of God, just like he said.
Okay. What did he mean when he said, when he was confronted by the Pharisees, and they were talking to him about Abraham.
Right.
He said, before Abraham was, I am. What did he mean by that?
I think that's a spurious scripture in the New Testament. I don't think that exchange ever took place.
Okay, so that never took place. All right.
I don't believe so, no.
All right. And what's your basis for that?
I just don't believe it.
In July, it was really cool to welcome Ralph Sarchie to the show. He is the man who was the inspiration for the film that came out over the summer, directed by Scott Derrickson, called Deliver Us from Evil. It was basically a thriller or a horror film, but it was based on the true life events of Ralph Sarchie's life and his experience. He was a former NYPD sergeant, and as a police officer, he ended up transitioning into becoming also a demonologist. And he wrote a book about his life and his experiences and some of the encounters that he had had. And that book was ultimately turned into a mainstream Hollywood film starring Eric Bana and as Ralph Sarchie. Anyway, Ralph was really cool when I reached out to him, and he said he would come on the show, and he was really candid about his experiences, and it was cool to hear not only about his encounters with demons and hauntings and that type of thing, but it was also really cool to hear him talk about what it was like to be on the set of this Hollywood film and that type of thing. So really, really cool guy, really nice person. And in this clip, you're going to hear him talk about the potential similarities between being a tough cop in one of the, most dangerous areas of New York, and how that is similar or dissimilar to being a demonologist. So here's Ralph Sarchie.
But what we do know is that where you worked as a cop is one of the most violent precincts in the country, and you faced your fair share of evil before ever becoming involved in demonology. Are there parallels between the work you did as a cop and the toughness that you had to exhibit and the work done in confronting demons?
Well, that's a really good question because, I like to say that God chooses people that, can stand in the face of evil, but you don't have to be tough to do that. You have to have faith and spirituality. That's all you need. You don't really need toughness. And, I know some women that have absolutely no problem getting in there and doing the work. In fact, they get in touch with me. They want to do it, and that's it. So, we'll see.
My next guest was one of my favorite people in this whole widest of worlds. Anyone who listens to my show knows that I am a fan of L.A. Marzulli, such an awesome friend of mine. Really cool to have him on for that second appearance in 2014. His first appearance was in 2013 on Beyond Extraordinary. L.A. talked in this episode about Watchers 8. We also talked about Israel. We talked about the threat of ISIS. We talked about so many things, and it was just a fascinating conversation, as always. In this clip, we're going to hear L.A. talk a little bit about why it's important for Christians, particularly Christians who have a platform such as what he has, to not be so pigeonholed into speaking only to Christian audiences. L.A. is well known for going on secular programs and talk about his work and his research. He's well known for going on to shows like Coast to Coast AM, and he talks about how when we go onto these types of platforms where their worldview is not necessarily the same as ours, it's actually a really great opportunity to witness and to explain why it is that we believe what we believe, and perhaps help people who are listening, maybe who already have a supernatural worldview, to find like a grid or to find a context for their own beliefs, and ultimately, hopefully, the end goal is to bring them into the Christian worldview, which LA is very good at, reaching out to people in that way. And so I did ask him about why that is important, and here's what he had to say.
Well, that's the whole thing. Unless we shine the light, as it were, outside of the four walls of the church, we're just preaching to the choir. It's the same people that have already heard the good news and for the most part, let's say, come across the line and accepted Jesus as Savior and understand the gospel message and the idea of eternal life and everything that goes with it. We can sit in the pews and the church and have our own little party, so to speak, with everybody, and we all have our little smiles, and it's wonderful, and little hugs and everything. Isn't that great? But look, the disciples went out, and they went out to the end of the ancient world, and they told the good news to people that didn't hear it. And sometimes, in some cases, and it's a case by case deal with us. Sometimes you can just sort of spill the beans. Other times it takes a year or two, and we have to earn trust. We have to earn equity with the person that we're with before we can even begin to talk about the gospel. A lot of times when I'm with people that they know who I am, they know what I do, they know my paradigm, and you can feel the vibe. They think they know who I am. They think they know who Jesus is and what Christianity is about. And they base this oftentimes on some of what they learned in the churches when they were kids and they were hurt in the churches or whatever, or a lot of people are not churched, and they look at the hucksters on so-called Christian TV, and I'm painting with a very broad brush. There's some really good programming there, but there's a lot of people that hawk miracle, holy water, and all this other nonsense. So they equate Christianity sometimes with the Crusades, what we did to the Native American population in the Americas, and all that, of course, has nothing to do with Christianity, nothing at all. That's what people who said they were Christians did with it. And the genocide of the Native American, the whole slavery issue, these are black marks on the country. But don't equate that with Christianity, because it's not. So in my opinion, it's good to get out of the four walls of the church and talk about the gospel whenever we can. You just mentioned that a lot of people have heard me on Coast to Coast and have come to a knowledge of a biblical worldview, change their worldview. And I think that's fantastic. That's why I do that. That's why I go on Coast or in other programs. And hopefully don't sound religious, because we don't need to sound religious. We just need to talk in a normal way, the way normal people talk, without the quoting scripture every 30 seconds, because people don't know what that stuff means. When you say, John 1:4 or whatever, or, John 16, they have no idea who John is. And what's 16? Or Matthew 24, they have no idea. And I didn't know till 34 years ago. So we need to speak in a language that people can understand. And we need to be salt or light and shine our light. And we need to be spicy like salt is. And if we're afraid to go out, then okay, then now what? We're talking to people that already know the deal. And there's a whole bunch of people out there that are being deceived by what I call the New Age. The ancient alien crowd, the ancient astronaut crowd, are being deceived, in my opinion. And that's what we do.
In my opinion, one of the coolest shows from 2014 was the show I did about the EMP threat. My guest on that show was WorldNet Daily writer F. Michael Maloof, and he's been really, really passionate about informing and educating the public about the threat of EMP weapons and the escalating threat of an American catastrophe from such potential weapons being used against us. He wrote a book about it called A Nation Forsaken. He's an authority on the topic, and we discussed it at length. And what I will say, though, about one of my favorite things about that episode, because the interview is about half of the episode. The first half of that episode, I did a sort of retrospective, if you will, about the history of the nuclear threat on the United States and around the world, but I did it through the lens of pop culture, and I laid it all down, used clips from different films and talked about different books and everything that talked about the nuclear threat, and I was really enjoyed how that turned out. So for those of you who have not heard that episode, it's episode 26, EMP Threat with F. Michael Maloof. It's, I think, valuable not just for the interview, but also for the information at the first half of the show. But F. Michael Maloof in this upcoming clip talks a little bit about, a lot of public officials, for whatever reason, are afraid to discuss the EMP threat. Very, very few of them ever have. And those who do are labeled as whack jobs and conspiracy theorists and that type of thing. So that's kind of what Michael was addressing in this clip you're about to hear.
Now, remember during the last presidential campaign, I believe it was, Newt Gingrich, when he was running, was asked, what is the most serious national security issue facing us today? And he said, an EMP. And everybody was shocked. What in the world is an EMP? and he's been the only person with national stature at the president who has run for president who's even mentioned that potential problem. And it's never come up in any of the other campaigns. We certainly don't hear it discussed at the federal level or at the state level. And certainly our local first responders are totally ill-equipped. I know for a fact that if there was an EMP, it would dramatically affect even the emergency vehicles. Right. And I've had emergency responders tell me that personally, that their vehicles wouldn't function because they have electronic starters and other electronics inside the vehicles.
After the episode with F. Michael Maloof, I did a really short little bonus cast, I called it. And that was just something I slammed together, a little podcast, and I just talk about some personal stuff in my life and whatever. And I'm not going to play you a clip from it, but it was just a kind of fun little thing. And I'm going to be trying to do a little bit more of that, releasing some more bonus casts in 2015. But moving forward, the next episode that we did was supposed to be another debate with Chris Putnam and author Mark Hunneman. They both write about the supernatural, and they both write specifically on the topic of ghosts. And so they were going to debate whether or not human ghosts are consistent within a biblical worldview. And unfortunately, Mark Hunneman at the 11th hour decided that he was not interested in doing the debate, but rather, because we hyped it up so much, I made a promotional video for it. We had been promoting that the debate was going to happen for quite some time. Because of all of that, we decided to not just scrap the whole thing, but I had Chris come on just to speak very specifically about what his beliefs on the issue are. In this clip you're about to hear, Chris discusses the demonic realm and what Scripture says and does not say about demonic spirits. I think he talks a little bit about the etymology of the word demon and what it could mean, and maybe what we have read into the definition that isn't necessarily scriptural. So this is Chris Putnam.
Okay, we don't know what demons are. Okay, in the Gospels, there's several different words. A lot of times it says evil spirit. It doesn't say demon. It doesn't say fallen angel. It says evil spirit. And then it also says demon. So are those different things? Maybe they are. We don't know. Demons, the fall of the angels, the origin of the demonic realm, it's not discussed in Scripture. It's completely silent. And so for us to go around claiming that we know what all these are, I think is incorrect. I think it's not warranted by the Bible. I just don't see any biblical basis for it. And the passages that are there are pretty vague.
The only thing better than having Dr. Mike Heiser on your show in 2014 is having Dr. Mike Heiser on your show twice in 2014. I think it was October, I had Dr. Heiser back on the show, and this time to talk about his new book, The Portent, which was the follow-up to his hit book, The Facade. I loved both books, and I was particularly into The Portent. What an incredible fictional series of books that draws on the scholarship that Dr. Heiser has put into his research of the Bible and ancient languages and ancient history and all of this stuff. In this particular clip, Mike discusses a little bit of Divine Counsel 101. If you're familiar with Dr. Heiser, you know a little bit about this, but then he gets into guardian angels, and really ultimately what this clip is about is the role of providence in our lives, which is something that's a very crucial linchpin to the story of the Portent, and it's also a very crucial belief that Dr. Mike Heiser holds to very, very strongly, the role of providence in our lives. So in this clip, you're going to hear him discuss that very eloquently.
The original intention of all this, again, going all the way back to Genesis, was that God would have a human family to go with his unseen family. And for those of you who've read my Divine Council stuff, this is 101 here. But, Eden is the dwelling place of God. It's not just the dwelling place of Adam and Eve. It's the residence of God. It's the HQ. It's the nerve center. And why would God come here? Because, well, he already has a family, the sons of God that are divine beings and so on and so forth. And now he wants, more members, and he wants them to work together. They're all at the same place where God lives. That's where he conducts business, the affairs of the world and the cosmos and all this stuff. And so the biblical theological message is that God, the Divine Council worldview that I refer to is really God's rule, and in the wake of the fall, the reestablishment of God's rule in the seen and unseen worlds through his human and non-human agents. Okay, that's what God is up to. If you want, what's the Bible about? That's what he's up to. And if you can grasp that, then life, where you're put, and the other imagers, and you were created as imagers of God, that intersect with your life, there's an intention behind that. There is something to do. There is something that you are supposed to accomplish. And God will have people intersect with your life, and he will have, I believe in the whole guardian angel idea. It's a biblical theological idea, but there are divine beings that intersect with our lives that try to influence us, maybe in more overt ways occasionally, less overt. If you grasp this worldview, then the things that happen to you in life, by definition, there ought to be some discernible intent to them.
Well, we know we had Gons from Canary Cry Radio on the show several episodes back, but now we're going to talk about the episode I did with Basil and Gons. Now, those guys were on my show way back in episode 6, back in a couple of years ago, but they came back to the show in November 2014, and they were specifically on to talk about the Prophecy Forum. But as you can guess, when you got the three of us together, the subjects of our discussion went from topic to topic, and it was really, really fun. Love those guys. It was a blast. And in this clip you're about to hear, Basil and Gons and I essentially are inviting the Illuminati to participate in our respective programs.
Okay. I mean, and hey, if the CIA or the Jesuits are listening out there and they're looking for somebody to give, millions of dollars to be an assassin or something, I mean, I'm pretty good at karate.
Well, even if they just want to come on some quality programs and just air their side of the story, we are all very open to that interview.
Just open up. Vatican assassin, secret Jesuit.
They're like, we've been keeping this a secret for thousands of years, but these kids seem legit. I think
they'll get it. They'll totally get it.
It was really cool in 2014 to be able to talk to someone who I'd heard about a great deal but had never personally spoken to, and that's Brian Godawa. What a cool guy. He's such a good author. He's a great speaker. He was a lot of fun to talk to. I really, really like Brian, and his Nephilim Chronicles books are incredible. He came on the show specifically because he had just released the latest in his Chronicles of the Nephilim. I always say Nephilim Chronicles, but technically it's Chronicles of the Nephilim, and his latest book is David Ascendant. So he came on to talk about that. We talked about all of his books. We talked about the inspiration for how he got going on writing these books in the first place. And in the clip you're about to hear, Brian is discussing storytelling and art and imagination and how it all relates to a real understanding of the intent of the original writers of the Bible. Really fascinating stuff.
Basically what happened was I started looking more deeply into the ancient Near Eastern background of the Bible, the story, how they told stories back then, how the ancient mind thought. And I started learning how much my own modern Western mind had imposed on my reading of the Bible, the plain reading of the text. But what happened was, and this is all coming into what we're going to talk about, but it helped me to explore the poetry of the Bible, the storytelling of the Bible, and it brought me into a place where I feel like I was now more integrating my faith and my imagination with my reason, rather than just sort of have a reason-oriented faith and then my art and imagination was on the outside. And that exploration was what started to open the door to me understanding the Bible and pursuing my understanding of the Bible through the eyes of the original readers and writers.
One of my absolute favorite episodes of Beyond Extraordinary in 2014 was when I got to have my lovely friend Sharon Gilbert on the show. She had just released her book called Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse, and we talked about Ebola at length, and we talked about her theories at length in this show. Sharon also shared her testimony, and what a testimony it is. She's, obviously she's a woman who has been a believer for most of her life, but, she traveled in and out of the entertainment industry. She's a scientist, an author, a radio show host. She's an all-around, multifaceted, multi-talented woman, and in this little clip you're about to hear from the portion of the show where she talks about her testimony, I found it particularly fascinating because she discusses some supernatural things that she experienced as a young girl, and this was something I didn't really know about her. I don't think I'd ever heard her talk about it. That she had these experiences, and so I was really appreciative that she was so candid about it in the show, and that's what you're going to listen to, a little bit of that right now.
But God was always there for me, no matter what. Now, at the same time, I was experiencing, I don't really know how to explain it other than to say that it was almost like I was seeing into another world sometimes. As a kid, I would see things or perceive things that clearly others did not. I remember one time when I was lying in my bed and I looked over at the wall in our bedroom, and it was a bedroom with two large double beds in the room, and one bed would belong to my parents. There was also a crib in there that I just recently graduated from because I had a younger sister now. And so I was sleeping over in the other double bed over by the wall. And I was alone in there for some reason. It was unusual. I must have just decided to go to bed early. But I was lying there and looking over at this far wall, and I saw people. And they were just like heads of people talking to me and talking to each other and making comments about whether or not I could see them and what sort of person I was. It was a really, really, really odd thing. Another time in the same room, I remember seeing my mother come in, and she was battling with snakes that were underneath my bed. And I asked Mom about it, and she said, "Honey, that never happened. That was a dream." But I know to this day that was not a dream. To me, that was something that took place in reality.
In the last episode of 2014, we fittingly ended talking about Christmas. Of course, you probably know by now that it really sticks a bee in my bonnet when people talk about how you're not supposed to celebrate Christmas, you're not supposed to acknowledge that holiday, and all of the myths that have come up about the paganization of Christmas, or how it had these pagan roots, pagan origins, that type of thing. And I really felt the need to just really tackle it. I've tackled it in previous years in written form. And then Diana Learn and I talked about it in 2013 around Christmas time. but I wanted someone on the show who was a real scholar, a real historian, who could really put some of these myths to bed, especially the stuff about how Christmas is actually a celebration of the birthday of Nimrod and all this nonsense. So I had Cliff Garner on the show, and he fit all the criteria. He's a smart dude. He has a mind that is literally overflowing with knowledge, and he really laid some of these ridiculous conspiracy theories to rest. And as I said, specifically as it relates to Nimrod.
There's no proof that Nimrod was born on the 25th. There's no proof that Nimrod was Osiris. There is no proof that Nimrod was anybody. We don't know who he was in Sumeria.
All right, so I hope that I can get through this portion without too much incident, because there's trucks outside making quite a racket clearing snow and ice and stuff, so it just can't be avoided. But I truly hope that you enjoyed that little look back at a remarkable year in podcasting history. And now that we've completed our retrospective, it's time for us to launch into the reboot portion of our program. Now, fair warning, it's about to get real up in here. I want to share with you all a little bit about what's been going on with me, why there's been such a long pause between the last episode and this one, and then we'll take a little jaunt. A little John. Robin Hood and Little John running through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other has to say, reminiscing this and that and having such a good time. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Oh my gosh, what was I saying? Oh yes, we're going to take a little jaunt into the future of Beyond Extraordinary. So, as we've discussed, my last episode of the show was over a month ago, and this particular episode was meant to be the New Year in review type of show, and it just never happened. Many of you have taken the time to reach out to me and inquire about whether a show is going to continue, or you've showed such lovely, genuine concern, not just about the show, but about me and my well-being. So I feel like I just want to be as candid as I can. As many of you know, this past summer, my dad became really ill. And I've kept most of the details about what happened pretty close to the vest, just to protect my family's privacy. And frankly, because the entire ordeal was so painful, I didn't really want to talk about it all that much. And I guess I hadn't really realized until somewhat recently just how deeply this whole thing has impacted me. What I can say is that much of what my dad went through, and this is it's really hard for me to, say this publicly, because all of that, the baggage that comes with it. But I will say that much of what my dad went through was addiction related. And the result was that he had a series of strokes that he suffered, and they nearly killed him. He was in the hospital for over a month, and then he was transitioned into another facility. And during that time, I stayed with my mom. My folks live about 300 miles from me, so it was a long time to be away from home, over 2 months total, all said and done. And I'll just say it like this. My mother was and is very fragile. And I felt like I had to look after her almost as much as my father. Knowing that I'm an incredibly emotional person myself, I didn't really know if I'd be able to handle the stress of the situation. But I sort of went into survival mode. I filled out all of Dad's paperwork for him. My mom, she just wasn't emotionally capable of handling it all, So, I filled out all the paperwork. I filed all the insurance claims. I registered him at the various facilities. I spoke to the neurologists and various other doctors, and I took notes there and tried to educate myself as much as possible so that I could, know how to take charge of this. I wrote down his prescriptions. I went to the meetings with his social workers. I filed his disability claim, et cetera, et cetera. And, Mom just couldn't do it. And so I don't think I realized it then, but looking back, I was really kind of on autopilot. I very methodically just took note of everything that needed to be done, and I just carried it out. And I didn't really allow myself to absorb the full brunt of what was happening with my dad and my family physically and emotionally. So when Dad finally came home, I went back to my home, and I think at first what I did was just sort of disassociate myself with everything that had gone on, because it was just so painful and surreal. And I kind of decided that since I didn't know how to handle it, I just wouldn't handle it. Not the healthiest approach, I'm aware. But I tried to go back to business as usual, and I maintained that pretty well for a while. But as I received various reports of my dad's progress and his ups and downs and setbacks and stuff like that, I realized I couldn't quite fully disengage from it. And I felt myself being dragged down into sort of this depression that I really didn't know what to do about it. I just kind of felt like I was in a haze a little bit. So around this same time, something started to happen to me. And this old, familiar feeling snuck back into my world. And it was a small and almost unrecognizable thing at first, like a jittery unease. And although I didn't want to admit it, what it was is that old anxiety that I'd suffered from all those years ago, that same panic disorder that God had come into my life to set me free from. It was starting to weasel its way back into my existence. And because I'm human, I did the exactly wrong thing. And rather than turning to the Lord right then and there and asking Him to help me, I decided that I was just going to try to ignore it. And if I didn't give it any attention, it would go away, right? So in my very troubled mind, I thought that if I admitted that I was succumbing once again to anxiety, that it would mean that my deliverance several years ago didn't work. And the implications of what that would mean were almost more than I could bear. So I trudged forward, trying to hold my head up and act like everything was okay, put on a happy face publicly, but things weren't okay. And I started to have heart palpitations and obsessive thoughts, just like before. And it all culminated in this massive panic attack one night that left me feeling like I was going to die. If you've never had a panic attack before, it's really hard to describe. I think some people think a panic attack is just like getting really freaked out and anxious, but it's not what it is. It's very physical and very real scenario where your body goes into a strange state that causes like a racing heartbeat, causes you to see flashing lights in your vision, your throat starts to swell and close up, your chest tightens, you have pain in your body, pain in your limbs, your hands go numb, and like in my case, I became very nauseated and twitchy. And the worst part of a panic attack is this overwhelming sense of impending doom. It truly is one of the most terrifying things you can ever go through, and it's straight from the pit of hell. You know, we've not been given a spirit of fear, but there you are, just completely succumbing to it and overwhelmed by it. You know, but however, this panic attack, while horrific, it also served as like a really big wake-up call for me. And I knew I had to do something. I wasn't going to take drugs or anything like that, but the root issue needed to be dealt with. So, you know, I humbled myself and admitted before God that I was in trouble and I didn't know what to do. And I just completely broke down and I begged for Him to pull me out of this pit. And I was so upset, you know, because my entire testimony that I've shared for the past several years is about being freed by Jesus from intense anxiety. And I was so worried that if I admitted to people that it had come back, that it would make me a fraud or something, you know? So God and I really had it out. It involved the whole gamut of emotions, from extreme anger where I was yelling at Him about why was this happening to my dad, and why was this happening to my mom, and why was this happening to me? And then it transitioned into sadness where I threw myself a little woe is me pity party. And then finally, through a lot of work, it moved into acceptance. And then something really remarkable started to happen. I moved into a phase that was beyond acceptance. And I started to have hope again. You know, hope that my dad might be healed, hope that my mom would find peace, hope that I could be free from this evil anxiety again. And you know what? I am doing so much better. So I just wanted to be very transparent and honest with all of you about what I've been going through and why I decided to take a little break from producing new episodes of the show. And I was taking a break. Just my personality. I was taking a break, but I didn't realize it was a break. So I kept telling people like, okay, a new episode is coming out soon. A new episode is coming out soon, because I thought, I just need to get over it and put something out there. But really, I was taking a break and I needed the break. And I'm so glad that I did. Just needed to get myself through that storm. And I have no illusions that I won't come up against further roadblocks, and my dad is still quite sick. My mom is still having issues. My grandmother is really not doing well. She's not well at all. But the point is that after having my little mini meltdown, I feel better equipped to handle it going forward. And the most tremendous bit of insight I received about handling it is this. I don't have to handle it. I don't have to handle it all by myself. I have this amazing Savior who has been with me all the way, just waiting for me to come to him for help. And the moment I put down that arrogant human need to be in control of everything, he reminds me that his yoke is light and everything is going to be okay. Really, this propensity that we have to try to figure out all of the human ways that we can handle human problems without understanding that God is with us to carry us through all of this, it really does boil down to pride. Even if we know he's there, sometimes our first thought is that what can I do to fix this? I've got to fix this. And that's really me, by the way. I'm a fixer. I try to fix everything. I try to fix others, and I try to fix myself, and what can I do to make it better? But the first notion should always be to turn to him. And when we relinquish that control and turn to the Lord, he hears and he responds and he acts. Amen. He's our rock and our fortress and our deliverer, and in him we can take refuge. He's the horn of our salvation, our stronghold. And he eases all of our burdens and brings us that peace that passes all understanding if only we would come to him. And that verse that the Lord gave me when I first truly gave my heart to him was, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." That's Philippians 4:6-7. And I think it's important to note that this contains no promise that we won't encounter trials or struggles, or that we won't be tempted or tested. But what it does say is that when we prayerfully seek his peace, we'll find it. It was an important lesson I had to learn. It isn't about me or about what people would think if they found out that I was struggling with anxiety again. As with all things, it's always about Christ Jesus. And my prayer in that is that in being honest with all of you about this situation that I've gone through, that it will glorify him and add to my testimony that he didn't just deliver me once, but continues to be faithful to deliver me over and over and over again. And that is what he does for all of us, as often as is necessary. And that truly is an awesome God. So, now that I've gotten my head screwed back on correctly, what can you expect from Beyond Extraordinary going forward into 2015? Well, you might find that there is a slight change in direction. I'm feeling very moved to focus heavily on matters of spiritual significance, which may mean a little bit less of the super fringy type topics, which, don't get me wrong, speculation is always fascinating, and I'm not saying we won't touch on that stuff at all. But the direction I'm envisioning as of right now is one that will attempt to kind of return to the path that the Lord set me on back when EI first became a Christian ministry. The Lord's put it really, really heavy on me that my mission at that time was and still is to reach out to those who are lost and or seeking, to discuss the dangers of the new age and to help people navigate the tricky waters of confusing doctrine and how to recognize the truth. So one of the first things we're going to do is launch into a series on cults, particularly cults that masquerade as Christian denominations. And among these are Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, The Way International, and a lot more. I've got some amazing guests lined up, and you're not going to want to miss those episodes. I do have a few interviews in the can already outside of the cult series, and you'll hear those in the very near future. Another thing I'm feeling very pressed to work on is my own propensity toward cynicism. Somehow I became quite a cynical old bird over the past year or so. And what I mean by that is, ow, ouchie, owie, ow, ow. Ooh, I just gave myself a terrible paper cut. Ow, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Ow, that hurt. Oh, jeez. You know, I should probably cut this out, but then again, nah. Ow. I was going to keep it real, and the truth is that at the moment I'm bleeding. Luckily, I have these handy Band-Aids right here that feature characters from Disney's Frozen on them, because I'm ever so mature, which is quite appropriate because I can slap this puppy on here and then let it go, let it go. Anyway, so what I was saying is that I'm trying to keep my mind a little more open to supernatural and spiritual matters, you dig? Like, what I mean is I'd rather focus my energy on believing that there is nothing that my God can't do than spending time trying to determine, like, oh, God would never do that, right? You know, I don't want to keep my mind so open that my brain splooshes out on the floor, but enough so that I'm not quite so quick to presume that I know what a move of God looks like, right? And we're going to explore more of that in upcoming episodes. So, with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging in there and understanding while I took a little time off that, you know, it was just something that I needed to do. I've received such amazing encouragement. And here's the interesting thing. Since I spend so much time networking on social media, sometimes it's easy for me to think that my primary audience consists of folks that I encounter in that realm regularly. But really, I only interact with a handful of folks on places like Facebook on any given day. And yet, thousands of people download each episode of Beyond Extraordinary. That means that the people that I see every day online, who I love, they only comprise like a tiny fraction of the overall listening audience. And this has been made even more evident to me in recent weeks as some of you with whom I've never previously interacted have come forward with emails saying that you're missing the show and you're hoping that it comes back soon. I don't really know how all of you heard about this little dog and pony show that I'm running here, but I am so grateful for every single one of you, and I really do love you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to Beyond Extraordinary. Thank you for your love and your support and your prayers and everything that you do to keep this podcast alive and to keep me on track. You're an amazing group of people, and I pray that with the Lord's leading, we can keep this train running down the track for as long as He's willing. God bless you all, and until next time, be kind to one another, and remember that we love because He first loved us. Goodbye, everyone.
You've been listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina. For the latest headlines and program schedule, please visit extraordinaryintelligence.com.